before the formal introductions of Tim and Max Shore, who will be introducing Tim, we're actually going to take some moments to do some mindfulness meditation together. So I want to just invite you to get comfortable in your seats, and if you feel like taking off your shoes and liberating your feet, this is a signal to relax. That you can be at home here, because this practice of mindful awareness is it's a loving practice, and it's really about finding our seat, our place where we can feel at home in our own being and complete just the way we are. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes or doing whatever helps you just connect with the inside life, which is of course not separate from our outside life. But sometimes we forget. If it's comfortable for you to rest your attention with the movement of the breath, you can feel the breath in the body. For some people, it's easier to open to sound, the sound of silence as the room grows still, and the quiet sounds of each other. Just being here together. Mindfulness means bringing attention to the present moment of life, slowing into the experience of sitting quietly here. We're releasing everything that came before this moment. The busyness, the traffic, just releasing it all, just calming down and being here in this moment, because this very moment is really the only one we ever have, as we also appreciate our life, the chance to be here together. May we appreciate our life just the way it is and enjoy this wonderful evening. So thank you, everybody. I'm really so happy to welcome you here to this beautiful, beautiful theater. And on behalf of Inside LA, all our volunteers and everybody in our community, just want to welcome you and thank you so much for coming. Tonight, we are so lucky to have Congressman Tim Ryan here with us, and we're celebrating his book, A Mindful Nation, which you will have an opportunity to purchase if you don't have it already. And I just want to read one brief excerpt from his book that I liked so much. I heard Congressman Ryan speak in February and was so moved and inspired that I just want to share the experience with you. And that's been the impulse behind our whole speaker series, to share what we love and really benefit together from hearing. This is from Tim. A bumper sticker on the wall in my office says, celebrate fiercely. That's what a mindful nation does. We celebrate the amazing journey of our country, the ups and downs, the tragedies and triumphs. He says, I wrote A Mindful Nation to celebrate the talent and compassion of the people helping others to cultivate their innate mindfulness in so many different spheres. They and we have seen people change before our very eyes. They've seen members of the military become more resilient, so they have a better chance of connecting with their loved ones, reconnecting when they come back from war. They and we have seen veterans let go of years of pain and suffering. We've seen young kids become better and more attentive and caring students. We've seen people suffer less. So we need to celebrate this work today and now. And I want to introduce Max Shore, who will tell you a little bit about his work in founding the company Good. Max and Tim are sort of bracketed at opposite ends of the 30s decade and are sharing the work that we love and do at Inside LA of bringing mindfulness to everybody to benefit and transform their lives. And I'm just inspired by this happening across so many fields. Max's company is called Good, and their job is to connect all kinds of creative talent and millennial generation people with whatever is good in our society so that we can apply, it can be applied to the very real challenges economically, politically, across the board, the things that Tim will also be talking about tonight. So I just want to thank you. I'm Trudy Goodman. I'm the founder of Inside LA, and I'm just really happy to be with you tonight. So Max, please come. And you say a few things.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Trudy. It's really an honor to be here on this event. Just to say a couple quick words and to introduce the Congressman Tim Ryan. So I moved out to Los Angeles. I was 24 years old, and to start this project called Good, which we based here. And it was really because I was kind of asking the question, what do I want to do with my life? And what I knew was that I wanted to do something that would make a difference and be able to make a living and support a family as well. And it felt like you had to choose. You could either make a living or make a difference. I didn't want to make that choice. And so we started this project and we decided to call it Good. And that was actually something that we kind of got made fun of, and people were like, really, you want to call it Good? Because 7 years ago, good was really seen as something that was soft and weak and naive. And we thought that was kind of crazy, that really good was this incredible thing. And so we really tried to change the narrative of good and make it more appealing and something, and we really looked and we were inspired by what we were seeing here in California, but also all around the world, where people were taking creativity and pragmatism and really trying to make positive impact. And so as we did that, I was an entrepreneur and we were starting a print magazine, and the economy stopped working, and so I started working really, really hard and long hours and sort of stopped taking care of myself and was really just running on the spiritual fumes of trying to make something happen that I really believed in and that society was saying should happen, but it was hard. And in college, I had practiced a little bit of mindfulness and meditation, and I started kind of getting back into that because I was really stressed out and working long hours and getting hundreds and hundreds of emails every day. And it was really working with me. And I could feel that it was working when I would meditate. And on the days and evenings when I would meditate, it made a big difference. And I was hearing a little bit about these scientific studies that were saying it was working as well. But I still had this question, why aren't more people doing this? This makes so much sense. And and it was kind of this hard thing of knowing that it worked for myself and wanting other people that I cared about to have this experience of mindfulness, but not really knowing how to do it. But I remember I got a puppy at one point, and it was a rescue dog, and the dog was crazy at first. You know, it would scratch my arms and bark like mad when I would get home from work. And what I started to notice was on the evenings where I went to meditate, the dog would actually just kind of really calmly come up to me and just be so appreciative of me. So I was like, there's something, it's not scientific, but there's something that is proof that is happening here. But that was always a question for me of how do you communicate this in a way that's mainstream so that more people can catch on to this incredible practice. And so recently had the opportunity through Trudy to hear about Congressman Tim Ryan, and I read his book, A Mindful Nation. And I must say, I'm really encouraged by the leadership that we're seeing here to sort of take this issue and really show how this is just a mainstream, practical, common sense solution that works for Marines and it works for business people. It works for anybody who's trying to engage the world in a meaningful way. So it's my real honor to be here to introduce to you Congressman Tim Ryan.
Well, that was sweet. Let me first say thank you to Trudy, not just for Inside LA, but of the opportunity for people to come and have a place to sit down and practice, literally sit down and practice, but also for all the work that Inside LA does out into the community. I think that's what A Mindful Nation is about. I think that's what Max was talking about. This isn't for us, those of us who sit on cushions or sit on chairs and meditate. It's not just about us figuring out what's going on in our own body and own minds, but it's about how you can get out into the world and take it off the cushion and really make a difference. And Insight is a great example of that. So, Trudy, thank you for what you're doing for LA and as an example for... So a few months ago, we had this conference, and it was called Creating a Mindful Society, and it was sponsored by a couple of organizations and a new magazine that's coming out called Mindful. And it was about all the different aspects of a mindful nation, and it had panels and everything else. And I was one of the speakers, along with John Kabat-Zinn, Richie Davidson, who's doing a lot of the scientific work, a lot of the neuroscience at the University of Wisconsin. And the event was Friday and Saturday. So I got there on Friday night, and we're hanging out, and I don't speak until the next night. So we're sitting there, we're hanging out, meeting people, we're talking, and I meet a woman that I know who works with Richie Davidson at that time, and we were hanging out, and she brought her sister, who was not really into the mindfulness movement at all, but it was a trip to New York, so she came with her sister to hang out. So that night we all were leaving the event and we were going to go out and get something to eat, and we all kind of left as a group. And as we walked outside, it was pouring down rain. And so we all were like hustling down the street, trying to get to the restaurant that was just around the corner, and right in the middle of walking down the street, there was this huge period of increased rain and wind. So we all just ducked into different places just to get in from out of the rain. So I got split up from the two women, and they were in a garage, and I was hiding underneath some awning. And the two sisters started talking, and she said, the one sister who was new said to her sister who I knew, "Was that a congressman that I just met at this mindfulness conference?" And she said, "Yeah, he's a congressman." "Yeah. He practices mindfulness?" "Yeah. He's writing a book about mindfulness?" She goes, "Yeah." The sister said, "Will he still be a congressman after the book comes out?" So a lot of people ask, how'd you get into mindfulness? You're a congressman, you know, you're 38 years old, you're from Ohio. How'd you get into mindfulness? And I trace my kind of journey back to as a young boy in Niles, Ohio, watching my Italian mother and my Italian grandparents pray the rosary growing up. And there were rosaries all over our house. There were rosaries all over my grandparents' house, on the chair, on the bedpost, in the car. When my brother and I got our first car, 1981 Oldsmobile, first thing that went in were rosaries around the rearview mirror. So there was always this example of taking time out of your day to pray, to meditate, to have time to regroup and center yourself and get your stuff together. Later on, after high school, I had a priest friend of mine teach me centering prayer. And then on and off, basically flirted with different kinds of meditation throughout my entire life. And got into Congress in 2002 and was very active at that time, campaigning, raising money, working for other candidates, and working very hard with then Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi to help, I'm a Democrat, try to take the House back for Democrats. Worked very hard, 06, and then in Ohio's in the middle of, as you know, all major national political races. So in 06, I'm running around the state, helping my buddy who was running for governor at that point. 07, same thing, working with, to keep the House. And then the presidential election comes in 08, and the big primary between Secretary of State Clinton and then Senator Obama, back and forth all the way to Ohio. Then the big race for Ohio in 08. And in the middle of the summer of 2008, I was 35 years old, and I thought to myself, I'm going to be burnt out by the time I'm 40 years old, And I knew when I meditated that, as Max said, I knew that things were different. I knew I was less stress, more focus, more concentration. So I said, right after this election, I said to myself, right after this election, I need to jumpstart a meditation practice. And about a couple of years before, John Kabat-Zinn sent his book, Coming to Our Senses, to every member of Congress. And as I teased John, at least one read Coming to Our Senses. And he's happy with that at this point. And so I read, bits and pieces of it, and there was a whole section in there about the body politic. So in that summer, I'm getting on the internet, and I'm looking for places to go do meditation. And who shows up but John Kabat-Zinn? And there's a Power of Mindfulness retreat, the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, foot of the Catskill Mountains. It's 2 days after the November election. So I'm like, I'm in. I'm going to that sucker. And went 2 days after the election, checked my 2 BlackBerries at the door. No reading, no writing, no journaling, no phone calls, nothing. And had an amazing experience of having John Kabat-Zinn walk you over the course of 5 days into more and more and more silence, to where there was a point where there was a 36-hour period of silence in the middle of the retreat. Now, imagine that on Capitol Hill, huh? 36 hours of silence. I think we'd all like government a little better if we had something. You turn on C-SPAN, and nothing's going on. But in the middle of that experience, we were doing a walking meditation. It was sit, walk, and we were doing a walking meditation. And it really, for the first time, just my mind and body just aligned. And I was completely present in that moment as I was walking, and the snow was coming down, and I could hear my feet hit the leaves and crunch the leaves, and I could hear the brook on the side. I was just completely present. And the only thing I could equate it to at that point was when I used to play sports, and it didn't happen a lot, but where you were in the zone, where your mind and your body were completely present. And it hit me that you could actually train your mind to be in the present moment. Of course, not all the time, but you can discipline it to be in the present moment. And those of you who have been on retreats know how you have those moments, And then those of you who have been on retreats know that 3 seconds later, your mind's back going, we need to put this in schools. We need to put this in healthcare system. We need to study this. Da, 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 da. Your mind's going crazy again. But it did hit me that this could really be a powerful, powerful tool at a very, very low cost to help our country and to help reduce some of the suffering that happens all over our country and that I see every day in my congressional district in Youngstown, Ohio, in Akron, Ohio. And so after the retreat, I went up to see John, and I was like, John, this needs to be in schools, and we need to study this. And then John said, it's already happening, and you need to go meet the people who are doing this work. And he basically sent me on a journey over the course of the next year, year and a half. I'm still on it, but meeting the people who are doing this work. And the first place I went was up to Wisconsin on Super Bowl Sunday to see Richie Davidson. Now, I used to play quarterback in high school. I'm from Ohio. I'm an Ohio State Buckeyes fan. You don't just leave Ohio and go somewhere on Super Bowl Sunday. You stay home and you watch it with your buddies. But I was so inspired by what was going on and the work that I just wanted to learn more and more about it. And I went up and I met Richie, and then I started meeting people in the field of education. I started meeting people in the healthcare field. Started meeting people who were doing work in the military, and they just blew my mind. And to see and read and study about the science of mindfulness and what's going on in our bodies and how our body evolved to appreciate and utilize fear in order to survive, but how that fear and the cortisol, the stress hormones that run through our bodies that were very helpful in limited situations when addressing a predator are not meant to be ramped up all the time by digesting fear and negativity and creating stories in our head all the time. And what it's done is it's making us sick, and we have these very high levels of stress. And what I was learning as I went through and learned about the science is that this stress is causing, as we generally know, heart disease, high blood pressure, ulcers, type 2 diabetes, dare I say erectile dysfunction, like name it. Stress is a huge issue for our healthcare system. And as a policymaker, why wouldn't we want to look at very low-cost, simple ways of trying to reduce stress so that it will relieve some of the pressure on the healthcare system? And I know it's not a silver bullet, but it will free up resources that we can maybe spend on things we don't have as much control about. And all the talk of healthcare reform, of prevention, and as we all talk about in the field of healthcare about prevention, when you go to a screening, it's still too far downstream. You know, you're getting a screening for something that has, you know, do you have cancer or not? Do you have some other ailment or not? And what mindfulness, to me, can be is real prevention, more upstream than even the downstream screenings, which are very, very important. And they need to be funded and addressed and accounted for. But how do we get past that? And I started to learn all of these things and see how it would affect stress, and learned that a lot of stress literally inflames your body, and that when you're inflamed, it causes all of these other problems. But that when you practice mindfulness, you can actually, the mindfulness actually acts as a cooling agent. It actually cools your body down. And that can allow your body to heal itself. One of the studies I talk about in the book is the issue of one of the ailments is psoriasis. And one of the treatments for psoriasis is to put the patient into a light box. So John Kabat-Zinn did this study where they had a group of psoriasis patients who went into a light box. And then they had a group of patients go into the light box and practice mindfulness while they were in the light box. The group that practiced mindfulness while they were in the light box needed 4 times less the treatments than the other group. So as someone who is a policymaker, you think, well, how much is it for one trip into the light box. And this patient's going to have 4 times less the treatments in the light box, multiplied by all the people in the country who have psoriasis or get this specific treatment. And you can begin to see how this can have a significant effect over time of reducing healthcare costs. And we should be putting together now a big longitudinal study to figure out how this will save us money and start to continue to build a case for this, because it's critical. And look at the medication, the prescription drugs that are spent on heart disease, on high blood pressure, on ulcers, on all of these things. We could begin to limit that number over time through a very, very simple practice. The other field was the field of education, which I think is extremely hopeful. We were able a couple years ago to get a grant for $1 million to put mindfulness and social and emotional learning into 2 school districts in Ohio, one in Youngstown, one in Warren. And it's just amazing to see how the teachers and students and parents have responded to this. Here we are in Youngstown, Ohio, and I walk into a classroom and there'll be 20 kids laying on the ground doing a body scan. And they close their eyes, and I gotta tell you, I pull out my camera phone and I'm like taking pictures of them, because it's unbelievable. One, that it's happening in Youngstown, Ohio, but that it's really resonating with the teachers. And when we first got it in, the woman running the program, Linda Lantieri, who runs the Inner Resiliency program, she brought me in. She does like a 5-day training with the teachers. And they would maybe, bring the chime and sit for maybe 5 minutes in the morning, maybe 5 minutes in the evening. They would go through all the social and emotional learning exercises of identifying your emotions and all of this stuff. And on the 4th day of the 5-day training, she had me come to see what was going on. So I'm walking in, and this was all my idea. I talked the superintendents into it, I got the money for it, but I really wanted us to try it. And so I'm walking in, and I'm getting a little nervous now, because I'm thinking, what are the teachers going to think of this whole idea? The hotshot young congressman has an idea, okay? Which means you got to come to a seminar for 5 days. Most teachers don't like that. So I was getting a little nervous as I was walking in, and I get there, and it's really quiet, which I thought was unusual. It made me a little more nervous. But I walked in, and they did this exercise. I talked for a few minutes, and we did this exercise where Linda had this globe that was a stuffed globe, and she would say, okay, just tell Tim what you feel about happened this week. How do you think? How's it going? And someone raised their hand, she'd throw them the globe, and they would answer. And the first teacher said, I have been waiting 30 years for someone to come teach me this. I was like, whoa, that's good. Very positive. Yeah. I was like, okay, keep going. So they get the globe, throw it to the next person. This woman said, it was in August, they weren't in school yet. She said, I am actually treating my own kids at home differently. I'm treating my husband differently. Now, they weren't sitting in a retreat for 5 days. They're doing 5 minutes in the morning and maybe 5 minutes in the evening. They threw it to another woman. She stood up. She goes, I feel like I'm born again. Wow, this is great. So, because we're going so quickly, we're going so fast, we're on this treadmill that even just a few minutes of stopping and breathing has this huge, profound effect, especially on people who are on the front lines in some of these very, very difficult situations where there's high levels of conflict, there's violence, there's abusive relationships, and all of this goes before our teachers. And then there was a guy in the back who was about my age, and I thought, well, here we go. Maybe the women like it, but the men, the dude's not going to like it so much. Gets the ball, and he says, I just want to say that last night I was at my daughter's soccer game, and I was actually at my daughter's soccer game. My mind wasn't, 100 miles away. I wasn't playing around with my BlackBerry. I was looking at my daughter, just thinking, God, she's not going to be this old much longer, The sky was blue, the grass was green, she's running around, the sun was out. It was unbelievable. And he said, this is just magnificent, and I just want to thank you for bringing this to our school district, because it's already helping me, and we've only been doing it 5 days. I think that's the power of us just slowing down just a little bit and recognizing what we're missing and stopping as a country and just saying, wait a minute, are we really going down the road we all want to be going down? A lot of people talk about family values. Well, why don't we talk about valuing time with our family and creating an economy and a society and systems that can be put in place for us to really enjoy those precious moments that we have with each other. And I weave in and out of a mindful nation, being raised 2 blocks from me with my grandparents, my Italian grandparents. It was great. My mom lived here, Our Lady of Mount Carmel Catholic School was here, and my grandparents lived here, all within like 3 blocks. My parents got divorced, so my mom was going to work, and we never knew where my grandmother was going to be. Where was the pasta fazool going to be when I got done with school? So we would be done with school at 3 o'clock, and we had to ask, is Grandma going to be at our house, or do we got to go down to Grandma's house? Either way is fine, because I'm going to get fed. And it was time with the family. My grandfather would get home from work at 3 o'clock, worked at the steel mill for 40 years. He would get home from work at 3 o'clock. First thing he would do, go to the garden, work in the garden for a couple hours. Then he'd have a happy hour with my uncles, my great uncles, his brother-in-laws. And then they'd have a family dinner. And on the weekends, they would have a picnic at the park, and the whole family would go down. They'd grill out and play bocce and throw the football around. It was great, but there was time for that. And what I want a mindful nation to do, as much as we need it implemented in schools and healthcare and military and veterans and these other things, and how important it is, but it's about us really slowing down and figuring out how we can really align ourselves, like a GPS when you get off route. Okay, it just realigns you and gets you going back in the right direction. And that's kind of what I feel like we need to do. But if we don't slow down enough, we're never going to have the space to say, okay, what direction are we going in? Who runs a company that way, where they don't take a step back, say, okay, is this company, is this nonprofit, is this city, is this state, is this church, is this going in the direction we want to go in? And we need to allow space for that. One of the other areas that this has been really profound is in the area of the military and the veterans who are coming back. And, it's just been really a tough time for a lot of soldiers who have been involved in some very tough, complicated situations. And their family has been as well. That cortisol I was talking about earlier, running through your veins. Well, these guys and women who go on tour for 15 months and have that ramped up level of cortisol for that period of time and come back home and then go do it again and then come back home and go do it again, it kills your nervous system. And it doesn't allow for your body to deal with the stress. It just gets overwhelmed. And so I think mindfulness is right now being used by the United States Marine Corps to be able to help build up the resiliency for a lot of these soldiers and helps them deal with the complex situations and the emotional states that they have to deal with. And the Marines are loving it now, and they're ramping it up, and they want every single soldier or every single Marine to have it. And that's starting to spread throughout the military, which could be huge in helping us combat PTSD. Because we have a lot of these soldiers, 18 soldiers a day, 18 veterans a day commit suicide. 18 a day in this country, from all different wars. And you know, what's really sad is that if you get killed in action in Iraq or Afghanistan, you know, you're on the front page of the newspaper, as you should be. And there's flags, and there's ceremonies, and there's parades. But if you make it back, and 6 months or 12 months later, you take your own life because of what happened to you over there and how your brain and nervous system were destroyed. If you commit suicide 12 months later, you're in the obituary section with the rest of us. And it is this quiet black mark against our country. It is a black eye for our country. And I believe that mindfulness, both on the front end and possibly in the back end, could be very, very helpful. You know, you think, lastly, let me just say, with some of the students, because most people are interacting with kids at some level, and you think about the world that they're growing up in right now, and you think about the fact that the average teenager sends between 3,000 and 4,000 text messages a month. Don't act surprised, come on. But that number is actually stunning. 3,000 to 4,000 a month. Growing up, and their brains are developing while they're looking at all this technology. And not that the technology is all bad, but overload of information. All of these distractions, all of the technology coming into their lives. Many of them live in neighborhoods that are violent, or around abusive relationships. And that, a lot of those people, kids, are the 20 and 30% who never, ever make it out of high school. How are we going to be a competitive country when we're just going to say 30% of our kids aren't going to graduate from high school? It's never going to work. We're competing against China. 1.3 or 4 billion people. We're competing against India. We've got to be very competitive, and we've got to have our kids, our workforce on the field playing for us. And I think mindfulness can be a real benefit for us. Just say in the field of education, when I started to get into the science, you look at how the brain works. And you have the older part of your brain, your amygdala, and when you're under very high levels of stress, your amygdala gets very, very activated, and you get into fight, flight, or freeze. And when it's very, very activated, information will go into your amygdala and only be processed by your amygdala. So these kids who are in violent situations or are in abusive relationships, their amygdala is so activated all the time that information is only getting processed there. When you calm your amygdala down, as you can do with the practice of mindfulness, you begin to calm your amygdala, and information will then make it through your amygdala and actually get up to your prefrontal cortex, where you have your executive functions, where you can cultivate your attention span, your working memory, your ability to make decisions. All of these things are all done, your high order thinking skills that you need for math and science, all done in your prefrontal cortex. So you have these kids who aren't doing very well, and you're not giving them any tools to be able to understand and deal with their own minds, their own brains. And instead of just yelling at kids to pay attention, we will actually teach them how to pay attention. And what could be more fundamental than that? It doesn't matter how great of a teacher you are, or it doesn't matter, what program you have, or how good your curriculum may be. If the kid's not paying attention, what's it matter? Because the kid's not paying attention. It's a Yogi Berraism. And mindfulness can give these kids the skills they need to learn how to pay attention. And that can make all the difference. And it also helps their emotional state as well. I'll tell you one last story. Goldie Hawn has a foundation called Mind Up. And it teaches mindfulness to students in elementary schools. So I meet her, we go down to a school that she has in Virginia. We walk into the school, it's great. Part of the curriculum is about the brain science is infused into the curriculum. So I'm walking down the hallway, and it's normal elementary school. There's, art projects on the wall. And I look up, and it's everything you'd normally see. It was a paper plate, and there was some yarn, glue, different colors. And I look at it, and it says underneath, amygdala. So I turn to my staffer and I go, what's the amygdala? I actually knew. But they have on the paper plate, on one side was, this is your amygdala under a lot of stress. Yeah, and this is your amygdala when it's calm. And the under stress amygdala had the red yarn, and the calm amygdala had like the blue yarn or something like that. So they were beginning to teach these kids actually what was happening in their brain as they would get excited or stressed out. And so we walked through a couple of the classrooms, and they were teaching them how to understand what emotions were coming up in different ways and how to deal with it and how to calm yourself down and all of this. But I'll never forget, now this was a tough school district. It was a good school district. School was clean, good, but there was gangs. There was a lot of socioeconomic issues that the school was dealing with. And we went into the classroom. We sat down. There's maybe 15 or 20 of us in the room. And we sat for a minute, rang the chime. It was only like a minute or two. Complete silence with the kids. And the teacher rang the bell again and said to the kids, okay, now we're going to call on you and you just tell us what's on your mind. What were you thinking about? And they went to the first kid, and the kid said, oh, I was thinking about recess, something like that. The next kid was like, oh, I was thinking we got a test or a quiz in the next class. And then there was a young boy who was sitting there, and he knew it was his turn, and he just put his head down. And the teacher said, come on, Johnny, you got to tell us what you were thinking. Got real quiet, put his head down. It was like really intense because everyone knew something was up. She said, come on, you got to share it with us. Everyone has to say things they sometimes don't want to have to share. And the kid, with water in his eyes says, I'm worried my brother didn't come home last night. So here's a young boy in a school, tough neighborhood, and he's trying to learn, but he can't concentrate because he doesn't know if his brother's dead or alive. And the power of mindfulness is not going to make those problems go away. We're not going to all live in a utopia if we all practice mindfulness. It's not going to happen. But what it will do is give that kid the skills that he may need in his life as he moves forward to deal with all of these difficult circumstances. And he'll screw up and he'll make mistakes. But I feel better as a policymaker, as I think a lot of you do or you wouldn't be here, that let's start giving these kids the skills that they need to actually go out into America in 2012 or 2020 or whenever they're going to graduate with the skill set that they need to actually live in America and navigate the complexities of everything that's coming at them. Those are the most essential skills we can give them. I mean, think about the jobs we all have. How much of it is really technical expertise that you need of the job? 10%? 15, 20% maybe of actual technical expertise that you need to get that job done. The other 80% is how you get along with people, how you present yourself, your emotion, how you deal with emotional states, how you listen, how you communicate, the social and emotional intelligence that you need to survive. That's most important, and it needs to be, I think, a hallmark of what we begin to teach our kids and really infuse it. So you can see, why I'm optimistic about the future of our country, because I think when I see these pioneers and I think of the people in our country who are doing it, the Marine Corps. People say, well, how are you presenting this to people? Well, I talk about the science, but what's very important too is you talk about the Marine Corps is doing this. Google has a whole program called Search Inside Yourself. There's a new book out from someone from Google. Procter & Gamble's doing it. Target's doing it. General Mills is doing it. Phil Jackson out here with the Lakers did it with the Bulls. Marines. I mean, you're starting to see major institutions in the country and all of the science that is behind it. UCLA, Stanford, Emory, Harvard, UMass, all of these great institutions, University of Miami, Florida, all of these great institutions are studying this stuff saying, boy, there's something really significant here. So I say, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? We've got a ton of challenges in the country. And what we're doing clearly is not working. And here we have a very simple practice that is a skill that we can teach everybody, that we can get our doctors and our nurses and our healthcare workforce, we can get our teachers, we can start teaching it in teacher college, we can start teaching it in medical schools all over the country. The average stay for a Marine is like 5 or 6 years. So those Marines who get trained will then be coming back into communities all over the country. There's a way for us to ramp this up. And by slowing down and having people all over, we will begin to realign our country. And we will be able to realign our priorities in this country and start concentrating and focusing on what really, really matters. And I think mindfulness can be the thing that really helps us reshape the kind of country that we want. And I just want to end with a quote that I've been using in my talks that I think is significant, one, because it's so poignant and insightful and inspiring, but also because this speech was given by Robert Kennedy in 1968. And we are still trying to grapple with some of the same issues that he mentioned in that very brief campaign and in this speech. And I hope the book in some way is an opportunity for us to begin to stop, reevaluate, realign, and give these young kids and these soldiers and the people who work so hard to keep our society together really what they need and really what they deserve. So this is a quote that was 1968, University of Kansas. Too much and too long, we seem to have surrendered community excellence and community values in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product, if we should judge America by that, counts air pollution and cigarette advertising, and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for those who break them. It counts the destruction of our redwoods and the loss of our natural wonder and chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm and the cost of a nuclear warhead, and armored cars for police who fight riots in our streets. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it tells us everything about America except why we are proud that we are Americans. Thank you.